I spent an entire episode of Plugged In advocating for EVs by busting the biggest myths people have against them, which are mostly lies pumped out by big oil. In this episode, I spoke with 4 EV experts to dig into the roadblocks that are keeping some Americans from driving electric, and what needs to change to free them from the gas pump. Right now, all-electric vehicles only make up about 9% of America's new car market share. Meanwhile, other countries are at 30, 60, or even 90%.
The rest of the world will be at 50% before us, unfortunately.
That's State of Charge host Tom Moloughney. And what he says kind of stings, doesn't it? The country that put the first man on the moon is now getting lapped by everyone else in transportation innovation.
What's the holdup?
Well, it's partially lack of interest. According to a AAA report, only 16% of US adults say they're likely to purchase a fully electric vehicle as their next car. And many people aren't interested because they're still buying the lies about EVs that we debunked in the first EV episode. Like that they don't work for road trips, they'll run out of fuel, or they're just too expensive. After researching and talking with Tom and others you'll meet here soon, I learned that there are 4 major roadblocks that America needs to figure out for EVs to make sense for everyone. So let's talk about it.
Yeah! Punch it, Margaret!
My Toyota, I love it!
Lack of convenient public charging stations and fear of running out of charge, aka range anxiety, are 2 of the top arguments against buying an EV. Nearly 40,000 public chargers were added in 2024 alone, and some are being built as we speak. But as of now...
No, there's not enough. And that's also very regional. You know, the coasts seem to have more infrastructure installed than, say, the Midwest. There's regions of the country that are terribly underserved.
If you take a look at this map, you'll see what Tom means. EVs are much more convenient for those living on the coast, and even then, there's room for improvement. Jonny Lieberman, host of Drive with Jonny, lives in the #1 state for EV chargers, and he told me the closest charging station to his Southern California home is less than ideal.
There's 3 cars charging 24 hours a day with a line of 3 to 10 cars waiting.
Even in places where chargers are plentiful, Jonny says there's still some old and outdated technology in the mix.
You plug it in, connecting, sit there for 5 minutes, doesn't work.
So yes, even in EV-friendly California, demand outpaces the supply of reliable public chargers. Meanwhile, when he was on a trip to Norway, where 90% of new cars sold are EVs, Jonny had a very different experience.
There was a gas station that had 4 pumps, and there was 12 EV chargers.
That's because Norway has made electric vehicles a national priority, and we'll have more on that coming up. But now, we've revealed some ugly truths about public charging in the US. But know that these are still minority experiences, and improvements are being made as we speak.
In 2025, we have more chargers that have been installed, high-speed public chargers, than ever before, and in 2026, we'll have even more than 2025.
He's right. America's on track to add nearly 17,000 public fast charging ports by the end of this year. Plus, more auto manufacturers are switching their EVs to Tesla's charging standard, or at least making a compatible adapter, so even non-Tesla EVs can take advantage of the brand's powerful, reliable, and super speedy chargers. At this pace, EV drivers will have access to 100,000 public fast chargers by the end of 2027. Regardless, relying on public chargers isn't even that much of an issue for the nearly 80% of EV drivers who charge at home, but it is for those of us who fall into our next roadblock. Just over a third of Americans are renters, which means they likely don't have access to a charger at home.
This place is surprisingly nice. You must be renting.
In that AAA report, 27% of drivers said challenges with installing a home charger were the reason they don't want an EV. While you don't need a home charger, it does really drive up the convenience and affordability factor.
So it's like 3 times cheaper to charge at home than it would be to charge on a fast charger.
Some innovative solutions are popping up, like EV Match. It's kind of like an Airbnb for EV chargers. It gives drivers access to chargers from homes and businesses that they normally wouldn't have access to. But Jonny actually has a better idea.
There should absolutely be a movement, like, you can't rent somebody an apartment without heat. You shouldn't be able to rent them an apartment without the ability to install a charger if they want it.
Jonny says solving the renter EV charger problem would likely skyrocket EV adoption rates in America.
To infinity and beyond!
But we need policy to make this happen at scale, which leads us to our next major roadblock. While other countries have been rolling out the red carpet for EVs, American policy has been, let's call it, inconsistent.
No, yes, no, yes. No, yes.
The biggest recent change is the elimination of the federal tax credit.
There's no way around it. The vehicles are going to become more expensive here in the U.S. and it's going to slow down electric vehicle sales.
Let's compare what we have in America to the offerings in countries beating us in the EV race. Norway has been offering incentives since the 90s, like no purchase tax, no value-added tax, half-price tolls and parking, plus they made a massive federal investment in public charging infrastructure. Over in Sweden, the government offers just over $6,000 in rebates, plus charging discounts and free parking in some cities. China offers tax breaks for over 4 years. Meanwhile, we're going in the opposite direction.
You're going the wrong way!
But here's what really gets me. Jonny points out the hypocrisy in our approach to subsidies.
Man, talk about subsidized oil. That's why gas in this country is so cheap. The first 25% of profits you make from oil is untaxed. And so the tax credit, not only is it doing the right thing, but it was also kind of leveling the playing field.
So we subsidize oil to make gas seem cheap, but when it comes to cleaner alternatives?
Nope.
But I digress. There is a silver lining for EV incentives in America. Some states offer their own. Tom Bowen from Qmerit, the leader in EV charger installations, told me that some corporations are making up for the loss of federal tax credit with their own incentives.
We're seeing many of our partners on the OEM side respond with additional incentives, et cetera, to try to encourage folks to purchase it. At the state level, and some of the utilities are still offering incentives.
That's great news for people who want to buy an EV, but as we saw with Norway's skyrocket in EV adoption rate, consistent nationwide policies and investments are needed to really move the needle on EV adoption. And we definitely need more policies that make EVs affordable, because yeah, you can't really find budget EVs. But before I get into that, I do want to first call out that it might seem hypocritical for me to talk about how EVs cost too much after everything I said in part 1. These days, EVs really don't cost that much more than gas-powered cars. And that's still true. If we're comparing brand new, recent model cars, the sticker price isn't that much higher on an EV. But if you are looking for a quality budget vehicle,
internal combustion engine, you can still get a little bit cheaper than EV.
That's Nikki Gordon-Bloomfield, founder and host of Transport Evolved. And the lack of EVs at that entry-level point of the market she mentions matters a lot to many Americans. Here's something that might surprise you though. There are cheap quality EVs being made. They're just not allowed to be sold here. The Chinese manufacturer BYD makes one model, the Seagull, which costs only $10,000. But high tariffs and security concerns prevent BYD from being sold in the US. And there are just no American-made brands offering anything close to that price point. As a result, buying an EV just isn't feasible for many Americans.
I can't do it.
On a positive note, there are moves being made to make EVs more affordable in America. General Motors and Ford made billion-dollar investments in new assembly plants focused on more affordable EVs with starting prices closer to $30,000. Tesla has been long promising the $25,000 Model 2, though the water is murky on whether or not we'll ever see it. And these are not $10,000 BYD prices, but it's trending in the right direction. And Tom Bowen is optimistic it will continue moving in that direction once more Americans become interested in these lower-cost EVs.
Consumer demand will drive this, and the consumer tends to win out.
Despite these major roadblocks, each of these experts are optimistic about the future of electric vehicles in America. Even though EVs only currently make up about 9% of our new car sales.
I had heard that 8% was a tipping point, and once you get to 8%, it's just all over, and eventually it gets to 100-ish.
And I've seen the adoption go from nothing, and you have areas of the country now that California, for instance, that are at over 20% today.
Their optimism inspired me to create a stretch goal for our country.
When do EVs hit 50% of new car sales in America?
If the federal tax credit was still in play, I would have said 2030. Now, probably 2032. I definitely do not think it would be after 2035, unless there's some type of a major disruption in the world that kind of slows things down.
I used to think 2035 would be for sure. Push it back to 2040 maybe.
We need to be willing and able to tackle FUD with compassion, empathy, and science and facts.
So what can you do right now to help America meet that goal? When you hear someone say, don't they catch fire all the time? Or something like, those batteries need to be replaced often and they're not good for the environment. Share our EV myth-busting episode with them. And as for this episode, the takeaway here is that America's path to 50% of EV adoption isn't about waiting for better EV technology. It's about consumer education, improved convenience, better incentives, and more affordable vehicles. The harder we fight for these things, the faster Americans will move away from the gas pumps. Big thanks again to Nikki, Jonny, Tom, and Tom for sharing their insights. Tell me now, what do you think is the biggest obstacle to EV adoption? Drop a comment below and stay plugged in.